Welcome, everybody, to the 5th Annual Music Entrepreneurship Conference. My name is Tricia LeClaire. I'm the Executive Director of the Hamilton Children's Choir and co-chair of the Hamilton Music Advisory Team. As we start today's discussion panel, we want to recognize that we're situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which is an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. So with these intentions in mind, we gather as members of the Hamilton music industry to share our knowledge and experience. This is the second time we've hosted such a conference virtually, and we're very grateful to local musicians joining us and live on Zoom and watching on Facebook. We know that the last 18 months for everyone has been very difficult, but especially the music industry has been affected and impacted. And so when we were planning for this conference, we felt that mental health and substance abuse disorder was a good, healthy conversation to have. And as a child of an alcoholic, I still to this day am very surprised at the stigma that continues to be attached by people in regards to mental health and drug and alcohol abuse or substance abuse disorder. I was fortunate to witness my parent recover and become a sober, active citizen and a giver, backer, or community giver of the substance abuse disorder to support people. But I'm still surprised at the difficulty we have about talking about it. So this is a really important forum to have. And hopefully this is another way of chipping away at the stigma that we continue to experience. We're also extremely lucky to have Over the Bridge, a local not-for-profit organization available to lead this discussion. OTB assists industry members who are the most vulnerable. They cultivate and achieve long-term mental health and addiction recovery goals, which is extremely important. So I'm happy and very delighted to introduce our moderator for today, Ace Piva, who is the founding partner and executive director of Over the Bridge.
Well, thank you very much for having me here today. It's a pleasure, and thank you for reaching out. This is a great conversation to be had, and I'm looking forward to it.
So thanks for introducing yourself. I'm going to hand the discussion over to you, Ace, to take it away. And I hope everyone gets some value and finds the resources they need to help them.
Okay, great. First, I love my fellow panelists to turn on their camera if they're able to, just so we're all in here. Beautiful. First of all, I want to start off with a little bit of a trigger warning. The following conversation will be about mental health, substance use disorder, and personal experiences. We may talk about suicide, self-injury, depression, anxiety, or reference other mental health conditions that may be triggered. So continue at your discretion, but I will be available afterwards if anybody needs to talk. As Teresa said, my name is Ace Piva, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Over the Bridge. It's a big part of our mission to continue these hard-to-talk-about conversations while providing a safe space for our music community to talk about it. And right here is a perfect example of a safe space. And part of these safe spaces is that Over the Bridge has an ongoing 2 times a week peer support group called Supporting Act. It takes place every Tuesday and Friday between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you need someone to talk with, we have a safe space for you to do it where there's no judgment, and you don't if you want to just come and listen, keep your camera off, that's great too. We are here to support you in any manner. Uh, in addition to that, I am a peer support facilitator. I'm a tour manager, sound guy at the Casbah, the Corktown Absinthe, this in Hollywood before they closed, and a local drummer. So there's a good chance you may have seen me around at a club or festival or two. Uh, but today we're going to be talking with our panelists, about mental health and the support that has worked for them. First of all, I would like to introduce to you Heather Valley. She's a Hamilton singer-songwriter. And Heather, I'd love to know from you, how are you feeling on a scale from 1 to 10? And what is your experience with mental health, substance use disorder, or, what connects you to this topic? Oh, you're on mute.
Here we go.
There we go.
All right. Hi, Ace. Thank you so much for having me as a part of this panel today. I think today I would rate myself at about a 6. In my own journey of understanding my mental health situation, am currently in trauma therapy and had a trauma therapy session this morning. So that did open some topics for me. And this is very top of mind for me today, just in my own personal journey. In the work that I've been doing recently in therapy, I've come to realize that I have had untreated OCD and untreated generalized anxiety ever since I was a child. I went through and did a lot of very normal career path type things based on, what the average is in Canada. So I completed high school and went to university. At that time, I did not envision myself as a musician. I was a music fan. I went through, completed law school, and started a practice just up the road in Brantford. And that was going quite well, but a number of factors that I had no control over, including an abusive relationship, put me in a position where ultimately I didn't have the toolkit available to cope and to accept what I was dealing with. So that led me ultimately to have a mental breakdown in August of 2017. And that prompted me to leave my legal practice. The major symptom that I was experiencing at that time was suicidal ideation. So I wasn't making plans, but I was only able to sleep by imagining that I was no longer alive. So I really needed help at that point. And I went to my GP. I received a referral to a psychiatrist and into psychotherapy, and I began the journey that I've been on ever since. So as a part of that journey, I found a lot of healing in music, and I speak about my experiences through songs. I've met and become a part of this wonderful community of artists in Hamilton and beyond. And so for me, music, the music industry, self-expression, and self-care go hand in hand. I've been on a journey that has included beginning to understand CPTSD, so complex PTSD, generalized anxiety, depression, and OCD. And I'm hopeful that today some of the things that I'm dealing with might be able to help the other members of our community who may be going through that journey themselves.
Well, thank you for your amazing check-in and sharing your story with us. And we'll definitely be circling around to some of the topics that you pointed out initially here. So thank you very much, Heather. Appreciate that. Next, I would love to introduce the one and only Chrissy Morrison, singer, guitar player for the Hamilton's Basement Revolver. Chrissy, how are you feeling on a scale from 0 to 10? And what personal connection brings you to this topic?
I'm probably feeling like also a 6. Heather, you did such a great job articulating things. I don't know if I'll be able to articulate as well. I just want to start off by saying that I am very much a work in progress. I have struggled probably for most of my life with depression and anxiety, and social anxiety. And then just recently this past year, I was diagnosed with bulimia, and that has also likely been a part of my life since I was a kid. Um, I write a lot of music about those things. So that is, I guess, the relation here. Yeah, yeah, that's about it.
Well, thank you for your share, and thank you for being here. That's amazing. Thank you for opening up with us. And Amy, I'd love to introduce Amy. She is a local musician who plays in a band called Coots Paradise. She's a registered psychotherapist, and she's on the Over the Bridge board, so I can't be happier to have her here today. Amy, how are you feeling on a scale from 1 to 10, and what brings you to this conversation today?
Well, I am also feeling a 6 today. And so it's good to hear that I have some other people on our panel who are also feeling that way as well. And I would like to thank both Chrissy and Heather for your introduction. It was great to get to know you a little bit more, and for you both to feel so comfortable to share and be so vulnerable. Again, I think that's such a big part of this process, is being able to be vulnerable, which also encourages others to be vulnerable. My experience personally comes from being in the music scene and touring, and both watching and participating in using different substances far too much, and just watching the impact that that has on other people, the impact that that had on myself, and the impact that that had on the actual thing, the very thing we were trying to do, which was make music and perform and do those things, and just how that really changed and impacted how that was delivered. For myself, I've constantly been having to check in on things like alcohol and the level of consumption that I would consume, partly because what I realize is healthy is actually not the norm. It's not really what would be something that, when you are in the music scene, would be considered an average amount to consume. And so that's also a really tough thing to realize, is that what we're looking at in terms of what people think is a normal is likely not. And how easy it is to be led astray by that, and by not anyone's fault, because that's just sort of the nature of how society treats something like alcohol. So for myself, definitely have had some personal experiences, and then being able to take that into a more clinical setting in psychotherapy, and be able to support both musicians and non-musicians in being able to understand mental health better, understand themselves, and understand how the two can come together in a healthy way. So, and I thank you, Ace, for inviting me to be here today. As you mentioned, I'm on the board of Over the Bridge, and I'm really thrilled to be a member.
Oh, well, thank you very much for being open as well. We got a great group of people here today, so thank you very much. But, I did have a couple of questions ready to go, but you brought out a good point there, Amy, about being normal and what is healthy. And I guess the big question for me there is, what is normal? I think we all put a lot of pressure on being what normal is. Uh, and there's some sort of social norm, that standard that we all sort of try to live up to. But at some point, I think we need to figure out what our normal is, and set our own self expectations, and able to deliver it to ourselves, and not so much to society's normal. So, we all have different experiences, and I'd love to know, what does your normal look like? This is sort of an open floor question.
I'll just follow up since I was the one that kind of brought it up, and then I would love to hear from the other panelists. For me, normal is actually recognizing that it's a spectrum. It's not a fixed point, and it's a spectrum that is different for each individual. And so that's really part of that process of exploring that within yourself. What is healthy for me? Not what is healthy based off of what I'm observing other people doing, my group of bandmates, the people I'm touring with, whatever the case might be, because everybody's going to have a different normal. But when you're in a really intimate situation and setting, like you are with a band or you're on tour, it's easy to get lost in what somebody else's norm is, and kind of resetting that, and not even consciously all the time. So it's also about this like deep grounding into yourself, about having those sort of set boundaries and being able to have ways that you can really enact them and keep them with you, despite what you might be facing and what you might be influenced by with other people and other people's behaviors.
Beautiful. Heather, I see that you unmuted. Did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on this topic because I think that this is a super important element of the intersection of the music community, particularly the live performance community, and mental health. And I can speak to it just from my own personal experience. For a very long time, I had normalized in my own life a relationship with alcohol where I associated relaxation with alcohol. Even preceding the time that I, became a musician and became a part of this community. So I would get home after work at the end of the day, and relaxation was that glass of wine in your hand. When my life started to change and the pressures that ultimately led to my breakdown began to impact me, I didn't realize that I was leaning more heavily on that relaxation tool as actually a coping tool. I did initially start to get help through psychiatry and therapy, but I was very nervous about SSRIs, about like medication that would affect my serotonin uptake, potentially impacting my creativity. So I turned away from that and instead leaned heavily on alcohol primarily and on drugs as well. I've resolved the drugs issue for myself, but the alcohol one was a lot more difficult to deal with because it's so socially acceptable. And living and working in a bar as well, you can find yourself surrounded by it, and it's very normalized. So when we're talking normal, what we're doing and what is normal to us may not be adaptive or may not actually be good for our health. And that's something that I've been dealing with and trying to problematize and understand a little bit better in the last few months myself.
You make some great points there. But before I circle around to that, Chrissy, do you have anything to add to that? I always want to make sure everyone has an opportunity.
Not really. I like what everyone else said.
Great. But, Heather, you brought up a great point about, when you're surrounded by it in the live community, you're there. Artists often get offered beer tickets in lieu of payment. And if the venue has food, they don't accept that. Like, you can't trade it off for food or anything like that. I myself, as a non-drinker, I just end up giving them away. So it's like, cool, I'm glad, my mom, dad, or partner could have a drink or two or whatever. But, it is a tricky thing to manage, because for the bar owners, it's a cheap way to show their appreciation, and the gesture is there. And depending on how many people show up, they may or may not be able to pay you. Especially on the local level, it could be 2 people, 0 people, 200 people. The show really depends. But no matter how many people show up at the show, the alcohol is the first, give out. And so I guess my question is, when we're given these offers, and it's not done mean-spirited at all, people are always trying to be friendly. How can we, what can we do to maybe receive some sort of, or what could we get, in lieu of, beer tickets?
Well, I know I can just speak from what is currently in place, at least at the Casbah. We have options available for our artists that are non-alcoholic. So we do have non-alcoholic beer for people who like the taste of beer, kombucha, and other options like pop and coffee and so on. I think, though, that ultimately, there are two really important topics here. One of them is personal responsibility when it comes to your own mental health state and sobriety as well, if that's something that is a part of your life. But also, we're in a very difficult position within the music industry for venues right now. So the venues that are still around, we're very lucky to have them, and they have really been struggling. So I try to remain cognizant when I'm performing and as well when I'm working, that those drink tickets, if I'm not going to use them, I tend not to hand them off just because everyone wants to support the venue. And, alcohol sales and food sales are a very large part of how they stay afloat. So to me, it's kind of a balance.
Right, right. Anybody else want to add to that?
I think it is a really, sorry, Chrissy, go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
It brought up a memory. We were on tour in the States, and I think it was at a venue, I think it was in Boston. And they gave us our green room, and before they gave us our rider, which includes alcohol, they checked with us first if any of us were not drinking, and if that was an okay thing for them to put in our room. So I think absolutely it is on yourself to be responsible for yourself, but also that's a thing that venues can do to make things safer for people. And I know that as a band, we are constantly evaluating whether or not we want to drink, and try to make sure that that's an open conversation that's happening all the time.
Mm-hmm. I love the idea of having that open dialogue within your band. Maybe save it for Friday, Saturday night, but the shows during the week, you stay away from it. Sort of that harm reduction approach there.
Yeah, and when you're a small band and you need to drive, you got to make sure it's safe too. So we often take turns, and that makes it so that you're not wasted every single night.
Yeah, in some of the traps that, although the touring and all that, it's a lot of fun, it's a lot of stress on your body, on your mind. I know from my experiences, tour is a place to escape from home things, home topics. You got to build a fence, you got to clean up that dog poop, you got to clean up whatever it is, right? Oh, I got a tour, can't do that, I'm out. It's a great excuse not to be home, or not to be responsible for at home duties there. So, I'm going to dip into some of my questions here a little bit, and I'm just curious as what your experience, how has that impacted? Three of the questions are pretty much the same, but how has your mental health or substance use or your recovery impacted things like your writing, your performance, or your career itself?
So I'll take part of this. For me, it's been I'm still very much figuring it out. I am when touring is a thing again, I know for my eating disorder things, that's definitely a trigger. Just knowing where I'm gonna eat, what I'm gonna eat, if it's gonna be healthy or not. So with that, I know that it's just going to be an ongoing thing. And I really struggle with photos after shows, and seeing pictures of myself. So I'm still trying to navigate that. As far as like how it's impacted my career, I definitely think my like fear of how I'm perceived has held me back, but I'm also trying to work through that. And I write a lot about all those things. I know that writing for me is like the best tool I have to like cope or manage that stress or anxiety. So that's what I got. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was a great answer there, and I love you're talking about being prepared by knowing what's coming up, what you need to do, with and definitely the challenges that you face, especially when it comes to how we look after shows and things like that. Uh, I'm interested in knowing, like, with those sort of reservations, uh, with those reservations, there must be something positive about the music that has you pushing yourself to work through these. Because the other option is don't play music and you don't have to manage any of these struggles. But what is it about the music that keeps you going?
If I could jump in on that one, I mean, the way that I look at it is that this is my life. And all of us have mental health as an element of our lives. Some people are more toward the neurotypical and it doesn't interfere. And then those of us who are part of this conversation and sensitive to it may have elements of their mental health that they need to cope with, to manage, to understand, and to be sensitive to. And so the way that I look at music and my mental health is that both of them are a part of my life. I'm able to use music to help me to process and understand the things that I've gone through in my life, because my songs tend to be autobiographical. And performance of those songs is, in a live context, is probably the most important element of it for me, because that's when I have the opportunity to connect with other people. So my performances tend to lead to conversations in the crowd afterward. And I've found that being as open and vulnerable and real about what I've been dealing with in my own life, which is very different from how I used to be. I used to try to pretend that I was strong and that none of these things were impacting me at all. And all that did was isolate me. Being open about it has created the opportunity to have conversations where both I and the other person feel less alone, because we realize that we're a lot closer in experience. Even though the particulars might be different, we're all people, and just feels better to have a community around you, understanding that we're all dealing with similar things.
Wow. Thank you very much. I connect with a lot of what you said about playing music and the positive aspects of that. Would anybody else like to add to that?
I just speak just from a physiological standpoint in terms of the impact neurologically in our brain that goes on when we play music and when we listen to music. It's one of the only activities that we can engage in really the whole world that activates a large part of our brain at once. And like I said, that's both actively playing an instrument or singing, but it's also passively listening to music. That's the impact that it has. And that's not, that has nothing to do with performing and all of that. So I think when we look at how what we can see in the research that music can do to us in that way alone. And then when we consider how purposeful it is for, like, let's say what Heather was talking about in terms of as a performer, right? You're purposefully doing that. So not only is it impacting your brain in a positive way just by simply engaging in it, but then the added benefit of purposely participating and purposely writing a song that allows you to process an event, a situation, a feeling, experience, and then to share that with the world and have someone come back and be like, hey, like that song, like that really hit me, those words, it was like you wrote that song for me. Those are the things where it's like a full circle. And then you go back, you're more inspired, you want to write another song. And again, that impact on the brain in terms of, releasing some feel good hormones. So there's so much involved in that. But it is that sort of, as Heather said, it's like a give and take. It's that connection, right? And that's really, I think, part of what we've been missing in COVID as well, because you can't really get that connection on a computer screen or whatever. So exciting that we're coming back to it. But I think that is also part of what drives us, is that there's a lot of things going on in our brain that we don't even know, that just is like, yeah, I gotta listen to music, or I gotta go pick up that guitar. But if we can trust ourselves and like let that guide us to what we should be doing, that can be such a helpful resource.
Yeah, it sounds like what's happening here is, you're building synergy, you and that connection with the crowd, and it's people that you know and love, and people that are total strangers. It's incredible, when you talk about how the brain lights up there and gets you going. It's the serotonin and the dopamine levels that that is often spiked by different substances and things like that. So when you're performing or listening to music, it's really bringing up those serotonin and dopamine levels that we're often chasing in the first place. And it's music, man. What a wild gift music is. And so I'm gonna, just because we're talking about the ups of what music brings, but when the music stops at the end of the night, whether you're going back home, there's often a performance drop. Sometimes it happens right after. Often it's 2 to 4 days later, where the first couple days you're riding that high. It was a great gig, and you know, especially as a touring musician, you hit multiple great gigs in a row, followed by a crappy show or a bunch of crappy shows, followed by a great show. But when you're performing, the dopamine and serotonin is still going strong. But once you get home and things start to settle down, everything comes back. If it doesn't slowly come back into its homeostasis level, it often drops a little bit. It's a term that is called post-show or post-tour depression. And that is something to be very aware of. It's sort of like when we go on vacation and you come home, you're like, man, I need a vacation from that vacation. And you need a few days to just calm your jets, cool, get your normal back into what you figure is normal. How has that experience been for you? I'm assuming everyone's here has experienced that. I have. I see a few nodding heads. On the post side, what's that experience like for you?
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Heather, please.
So as you were talking, Ace, certainly I've experienced that when it comes to shows, but I've also experienced it getting out of the studio. I find that being in the studio and creating, there are so many hats that we wear as musicians, and that's one of them. And for me, that's a very rewarding, but also stressful and fully involved experience. And when I'm at the end of it, I have more of a drop off emotionally than I think in any other context musically. So I have found for myself that it's really important to take a little bit of time away, but also to plan something to look forward to. So if it ends up being a show after that, that tends to be the best thing for me. But I don't know. What do you guys think, Amy and Chrissy?
I was just also going to talk about posts in terms of, and by the way, that's a great point because it's so true, right? It can be like a personal thing where you really there's a certain part of it that you really enjoy more than something else, right? And that, it's also kind of what I was just going to speak to in a general way, which is being able to anticipate, preparing to know that this is going to come to an end. So it's like being ready at the end of the show, let's say, to have something or some things that you do that start to help you to transition to being able to chill. So maybe it's, grabbing a tea while you're tearing down, or like just doing some things that are really purposeful to recognize that it exists. It's not a surprise. It's not like every time it happens, you're like, oh, I never wasn't expecting that. Like it legit is something that you can prepare for. So if you actually do prepare for it, first of all, it's going to have less impact because it doesn't feel like it's sideswiping you every time. And then you've actually got some resources, some tools to be like, okay, so I'm going to grab my tea and then I'm going to, I'm going to read my book, or I'm going to just do some things. And that really helped to like lower its brainwaves, heart rate, right? Like let's just lower that a bit. Maybe it's breathing exercises, but again, it's like what's going to work for me. And I have a couple different, because maybe I don't feel like having a tea every night, but and it's the same thing coming to the studio. It's like, okay, so I'm going in, like, I know this is going to be great, but I'm going to like give myself something or have something in place that I know is going to keep my spirits up, even though I know I'm going to feel down. Right. So it's like, I'm going to go buy myself an ice cream cone after the studio. So it's like, that way it's like, it's not the end of the world. I don't feel that bummed out. I can process it and have had some things in place to help that.
Yeah, I think that like, I feel this one big. And it kind of feels like the entirety of COVID has just been a post-tour hangover. We were supposed to, I think it was April or whenever the pandemic started, we were supposed to go to the East Coast and back, and then we were coming back to studio time, and that was feeling really exciting. And then it didn't happen, and it all got postponed or canceled. So yeah, I just want to validate that the post-tour hangover or depression, whatever you want to call it, is real.
Yeah, funny that you bring that up, Chrissy. Is like I remember I was doing a festival in the middle of Panama when COVID hit, and we were on the we were on the last vehicle to leave the festival site. Over 300 people got stuck at the festival for up to 6 weeks, and we were on one of the last flights out of Panama. So getting home was, and because we were cut out from the outside world because there was no internet, there was no nothing where we were, we didn't realize how bad it was before we landed and got into our car and all that. We knew it was getting bad, but we didn't know it was that bad. And it was definitely a crazy experience, and it's something that a situation I've had to manage myself over COVID. And so as COVID's relaxing, I've been able to do some shows, but then I've also had 10 shows canceled this month on me. So it's almost a little bit of a reminder of what it was like at the beginning, right? You're like, is it all going to, hell in a handbasket all over again? Like it's, is it COVID PTSD? Is society dealing with this? I'm sure we are on some levels. But yeah, it's been a wild ride. But I did want to ask, throughout the pandemic, or not throughout the pandemic, throughout your music career, as we identify some of these things, post-performance depression, you come home. What has been helpful in order you to manage some of those evenings? For me, I get home, like if I'm doing sound at the Casbah or wherever, I get home at 1:30 in the morning. It's not uncommon for me to get to bed around 3:34, any day of the night. But guess what? Ace Piva has a meeting at 10 a.m. and I got to be on my ball game because you're burning the candle at both ends, right? I would love to be able to get to sleep quicker and not feel like I'm rushing myself. But, I also can't afford to be up to 4 o'clock in the morning, 3-4 nights a week either. Has anybody found a trick that works for them?
Well, I mean, I think I mentioned just off the top that I've been back in with a psychiatrist to try to get some assistance, because part of that whole recipe for me is not just the high of performance or work, but also the anxiety that I deal with on a daily basis, which does have physical symptoms and also impacts my ability to sleep. So I'm about to start a medication, which I'm hoping is going to assist with that. But in the period that I've not had anything available, I have found that getting CBD gems helps me to relax at the end of the night. So if I'm getting home really late, or if I'm looking to relax late in an evening, I'll take 5 milligrams of CBD. You can take it in pill form so that it doesn't actually, like it's gel pill, so it doesn't actually
Mm-hmm.
impact your ability to vocalize and like sing properly. And that has assisted me.
Beautiful. Anybody else? I enjoy laying on the ground and doing some stretching. Stretch out the body, stick my arms up, roll around on the ground like a sausage. I pretend I'm one of those hot dogs in the convenience store things, and just roll around and let my body crack because I'm getting old. So
I think it actually makes me laugh, Ace. Thank you for that.
no
I
problem.
think part of it is kind of building on what Heather was talking about, and we were sort of talking about like anxiety and stuff. I think part of what we can end up doing to ourselves is creating anxiety, because let's say you get home at 1:30 and you're like I really want to get to bed. I got to get sleep. I have to get up early tomorrow because I got to go do that thing. So it's like we start to do that to ourselves, where you start to get a little bit of ruminating thoughts around something, and then something that actually sort of aggravates the capacity of trying to relax or whatever. So I also have, I think for me, just being able to sort of have that plan, like, okay, so if I don't get to bed till, if I don't fall asleep till like 3:30, 4 o'clock, I can still, I still get a few hours sleep. I'll still be able to get up and I'll still be able to go to do whatever I have to do. It's like giving permission for almost the worst to happen, and then it lessens maybe the capacity to upset that just in your own thinking, right? It's like, so if I don't get to sleep till 5, that's going to suck, but I'm still going to be able to get up and do my stuff, and I'm just going to be tired. Yeah, it's like we get really worked up about maybe the worst possible thing happening, and if we allow it to maybe just be that could happen, it does just allow that to not be something else that compounds already the challenges of, you've been up, you might have had a late meal, all those things that also don't help just naturally kind of going to sleep at a sort of regular time.
Beautiful. I think that's a great suggestion. Anybody else? Okay. We got a couple audience questions here that I would love to ask everybody. And the first is, I'm finishing my album. It has been difficult due to my financial and mental well-being. What kind of advice do you have for an emerging artist like me living in Hamilton?
Try to be easy on yourself. It's hard. But try to make space to be extra generous and gentle with yourself, I think.
And Chrissy, how do you do that?
I have like a list of things that I go to if I need to. I I try to like I try to interrupt what's going on. So if I'm like in a negative headspace, I'll try to go for a walk or like get together with friends, or I have like a bunch of outs that I have planned. Or if it's really bad, I have friends that I know are comfortable with me texting them in a crisis. And we have like a safe word, and just to like make sure that they're in an okay headspace to talk about things if I need to talk. I like to bake. That really helps me slow down. And honestly, binge watching TV sometimes just to like get out of a negative headspace is really helpful. It's like if you don't have the grants and the resources available to you that are out there, it can be really hard. Know that you're doing your best. You're doing what you can with what you've been given. And I think that's a beautiful thing. That's all you can do is the best you can do. So keep doing it.
Beautiful, beautiful advice, and thank you for the extra tips and tricks that you do to help maintain yourself. I'd love to hear from anybody else on that.
Yeah, I would say to not to rush yourself. I feel like that's something that I have struggled with in the past, and in speaking with other musicians, I've noticed this as well. Often the process of putting together your first album is very lengthy from beginning to end, and it can feel like you've been in the studio for a long time and you just want to get that music out there. But it's really challenging right now to drop an album in full album format and to really be able to work with that material on an ongoing basis long term. So I would suggest to the person who asked the question to consider putting a release date a little bit later into next year so that they give themselves a lot of time to release a few singles from the album rather than dropping it all at the same time.
We don't live in an album era anymore, so it's the era of the singles. So great suggestion.
Right, absolutely. And to try to organize some shows around it, because around each of the singles as you start to release them, because we do have a very vibrant music community in Hamilton, and there are a lot of people out here who want to hear what you're doing, but we need to know that you exist. So, come out, play lots of shows. You only become a better player as you play lots of shows, see what you're able to reproduce live. And it really is a learning process. Don't expect that you have to do everything and know everything right off the top. All of us who are musicians, we do this because we're compelled to, because we need to connect with each other and we need to express ourselves, and we want to be here for you and support you. So don't think that your first album has to be the make or break of your career. It's part of the process of your life and self-discovery.
Beautiful. Amy, any other tips or tricks that you could think of?
I would say just don't hesitate to connect with other musicians, in terms of, hey, what did you do for this? Or who did you work with for that? Or who did you use to do this? And talk to a bunch of different people so that you have a lot of different people's experiences to help direct what you think is going to be best for your experience. Talking to one person and trying to follow what they did isn't that greatest, because it's not likely to follow what you want to be doing or what you really feel like is going to be best. And you'd be surprised how many other musicians are out there who are willing to have a phone call, meet up for coffee, and just chat about some things, to share some wisdom, answer questions, you know, because that's kind of that's the best advice or the best information you can get from someone who's been through it, done it already, and is speaking from a place where they just genuinely want to help you because they see a colleague, right? Somebody who's doing what they're doing. So, you know, I think there might be a hesitation like, oh, that person might not, or might be too busy, or they might not want to talk to me or something, but you'd be surprised. And in the era of our social media now, it's so easy to connect with anybody, you know, and you can just shoot them a, you know, direct message on Instagram or something, and chances are they're going to read it and likely to respond, right? So it's like, take those chances to reach out. You just never know beyond some information. You might even gain a contact that you end up doing a show with, or that type of thing. That's the other part of it, is that the more you connect with others, the more you get yourself out there and you start to connect with the people who are in your style, your genre, the sort of audience, you know, that's going to be coming to see you, that type of thing. All of those things are just going to help. They just are going to continue to grow your career and make you feel less alone, which is such a big part of it, because that's what we do. We spend so much time either alone or with the same group of people making music. And now it's like, oh, I've connected with some other people outside of my sort of circle or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
I think
So,
I would add, I'm sorry, Ace, I'm just
go.
gonna add one more thing. I think for me, like a huge struggle I have is jealousy. And when I see other friends, singles doing really well or getting better publicity than me or whatever it may be, the biggest help has actually been to confront that for me, to like reach out to those friends who are doing really well and congratulate them and like even speak it out. I think you need to remember what your values are. And if your values are that, like for me, I want women and non-binary folks and everyone to do well in music. And I want to uplift those people and help them to succeed. I don't want my jealousy or my own self-worth to get taken down or like to ruin that. Like I want to celebrate my friends who are doing well. So just don't let it, like don't let those negative thought patterns control the way that you feel.
Mm. You make a great point about jealousy, and jealousy is a hard thing to get over. Uh, for, although I'm the moderator, I'm going to chime in as what I do is to get over those negative thoughts. Is I wake up in the morning, I put some positive self-talk material on. You know, give me a Will Smith, a Tony Robbins compilation. I put in positive talk, and I look in the mirror and go, Ace Piva, you rule today. Look at you. You're a handsome fella, right? And I laugh at it because half of me thinks it's a little bit BSy, but part of me is like, yeah, you are. You know what I mean? And having confidence isn't a bad thing, and it will give you the confidence to go talk to those other people, to grow your network and your community. We do only have a couple minutes here, but there's another question: is what is your favorite song that you have written that helps you through the tough days?
I tend to ruminate on what is making that day tough and then to write based off of that. So it would probably be whatever the newest song is, because that's the most top of mind issue that I'm dealing with in my own life. And then otherwise, I look to music that my friends and the people that I look up to create, because that's what drew me to music to begin with, you know, feeling like someone else understood how I felt, feeling less alone because of it, and then finding these amazing communities.
Is there one song that someone can listen to that you've written that has helped you, and maybe they could turn to and listen to help them?
That I've written, I would probably say I put out an album in 2019 called Desert Message, and there is a song on it called Ohio River, which is about, for me anyway, it's about dealing with a person who tells you that they're in one state of mind, but then their actions demonstrate something different, and how that type of an experience can hurt you because you're not being lied to, but the truth that a person is telling you doesn't match with their actions. So that's something that I've struggled with in the past in interactions with people. And, so my mind goes there because that's one of my biggest things.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm definitely going to listen to that song today. Chrissy, Amy?
Amy can go ahead. I'll go after.
Okay. A specific song from Coots Paradise. It was a song I co-wrote with my bandmate Wayne. It's called Meant for Something More. It ended up being a song that got put together with a video for teen LGBTQ suicide awareness. And so there is a disclaimer at the beginning of the video because there's a couple of scenes that are a little bit graphic. So I'll just throw that out there in case anybody does go ahead and watch it. But it's a song that it really just is kind of like your self-affirmations, Ace, in that it's just the lyrics are just that healthy reminder that moments are moments. But you are ultimately meant for something more than just the moment that you're in, and that if you recognize that it is just a moment in a larger scale of many moments in our life, and maybe not put all of our sort of eggs into that basket, then we also can help ourselves in that way to deal with the moment and then be able to move on to the next one. And then I think just for other songs, it's just, I love checking out new music and new bands and stuff to also help to sort of give that variety of like, hey, like I'm, looking for something different. And then you kind of stumble on something, either style or like a really powerful song. I just did that a couple weeks ago and found an album that I'm really digging. So that for me is always like, just throw myself into something I don't know. And then you never know what you're going to find that way.
And what album did you find?
The woman's name is Joy Alacum. And she's like a singer-songwriter. She did some, it's mostly like acoustic stuff, but just killer songwriter. So I certainly encourage everybody to check her out if you haven't heard of her. I'll put her name in the chat.
Beautiful, thank you. And Chrissy?
Our upcoming album, it's coming out in February, I think. The whole thing is called Embody. The whole thing is about all of this. But probably tomorrow we have, I don't know, the whole thing. We have a single coming out tomorrow that is a lot about mental health. Our first single from the record called Skin. There's a music video for it that I don't wear much clothes in, and it was terrifying, but in a good way. And yeah, I don't know. I think everything I write is about mental health, so I don't know how to pick a specific song. As for music I listen to, I have a sad Chrissy playlist on my Spotify that I just listen to when I'm feeling sad.
And it's okay to feel those feelings. Let them happen. We're human, and we're not alone. And just as a testament to that, Chrissy, for your playlist, every artist you put on that playlist has felt like how you feel at those times. I also have a playlist like that, so it's great that we're not alone. And there's one last question here. We only got a minute or so, and it's Ace mentioned the free peer support groups. Are there other free services supports available to musicians? There seems to be a few available for people in the U.S. like Music Cares and Backline Cares. There's one out of the UK called helpmusician.uk. In Canada, it's Over the Bridge, and a financial assistance organization called the Unison Fund. So if you're having some financial issues, they got some great programs there for musicians. Over the Bridge is leading the way as far as the peer support groups are. So, in today's conversation is ran much like a peer support group would be. It's here for common understanding and know that we're not alone. So I invite everybody here, in our panel, as well as anybody who's watching this, that we are available for you. It's free, it's no cost, and it's just conversation like this. So please join us. They are every Tuesday and Friday between 2 and 3 p.m. Eastern Time. All you have to do is go to overthebridge.org, scroll down just a little bit, hit the link, and it'll open up your Zoom and bring you right to our meetings. So, Sarah, Jeremy, how are we doing on time here? All right. I was told to wrap it up here. So everybody, Chrissy, Amy, Heather, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was very insightful for me. In the side here, Sarah just put in all of our social medias for everybody involved here. So please stay tuned.